concerned that the church, in its actually existing form, has kind of been going about things all wrong. That it's all about what you believe. It's about signing up to a certain set of doctrines and dogmas, and it's about what you think rather than a way of living life. And actually, I think Christianity is primarily about a way of living, a way of being in the world. In our society today, we are being demanded to enjoy, to go out there and we can have whatever we want. If we go out with the right person, or if we own the right car, or if we worship in the right church, everything will be good, everything will be great. And I think that that actually breeds unhappiness and discontent and unfulfillment. And for me, the church is there, paradoxically, with the good news that life is not about being fulfilled and having the answers, but it's about attempting to live in uncertainty, in mystery and unknowing. It's about laying down the pursuit of enjoyment and trying to be whole and being able to embrace our suffering and our brokenness and our lack and being able to find freedom within that. I mean, basically, I think we're all like the roadrunner, or Wile E. Coyote in the Roadrunner, who's always running after the bird. The problem is if he catches the bird, what's he going to do? He's just going to eat it. It's not that great. If he doesn't catch the bird, he's depressed because he's always trying to chase it. Or he perpetually just runs after the bird and never catches it. I think that's what we're like in life. We're chasing things, and if we were ever to get them, we'd realize they weren't that great in the first place. And I read Christianity as a good news that says we have to embrace the world, embrace our suffering, embrace our brokenness, and we'll be able to find in that a way of living more fully and more healthfully. For me, the church can look like two things. If you imagine a bar, some people go into a bar to escape their suffering. So on a Friday night after a terrible week at work, they go, they get drunk, they listen to music, they dance, and then they leave. But the problem is the next day, the suffering comes back. You wake up with a hangover, you're depressed, you're still in your terrible job. And so you have to go back to the bar. And so people go every week and get drunk to try to escape their brokenness. But there's another way that a bar can function. And you see this in Ireland, where I'm from, where a bar is somewhere you go to have a drink, meet with your friends, talk about your life, maybe listen to a singer-songwriter sing about relationships and broken relationships, joys and suffering. And what happens is after you go home from that experience, you feel lighter. You feel like you've unburdened yourself in some way. Now, for me, the church is often like the bar where you go and get drunk. You go, you listen to the music, you get fired up, you feel great, everything's going to be good, everything's fantastic. But the next day, the hangover comes and you're still in your terrible life and you have to go back to church every week like an addiction. It's just basically the socially acceptable form of getting drunk. But for me, the church can help when it's more like the bar where people go to talk about their brokenness. And so what I imagine is a church where the music and the sermons and the prayers are also about difficulties and doubt and unknowing, as much as they are about joy. That the whole range of human emotions are expressed in the liturgical experience of the church. The churches that offer satisfaction and wholeness and you can be complete, they're the ones we hear about. But there are little places, and I know one in Brooklyn in New York called Revolution, where I went one week and there are 20 people in a bar, and the pastor gets up, the associate pastor, he gets up, and he, by the way, he's a gospel singer. He's been singing gospel all his life. And he stands in front of those 20 people and he says, I've believed all my life in God and Christ. I believe even the leather in the Bible is genuine. He says, I believe that whenever I go up to heaven, the angels will welcome me. And then he said, but my dad died a few months ago and now it's all up in the air. And I'm suffering and I've got questions and I don't know if anyone I'm praying to is out there. I just wanted to be honest with you and say that maybe I should step back for a little bit, let somebody else take over while I'm struggling with this, because I'll be honest with you, I don't know where it's going. And as I sat at the back and watched, I saw people in the room go, what? Of course not. You're our pastor. Of course you have doubts and unknowing. That's totally fine. You can't step down. And in that moment, I saw a healthy community. Now, I'll just contrast it very quickly with another community I know where the pastor did the same thing. and they got rid of him. They fired him. And why did they fire him? Did they fire him because they didn't think he had doubts? No, of course not. Most of them did. They fired him because they didn't want to know it. They wanted to pretend. Because as soon as the minister admitted to his doubts, the congregation had to admit to theirs. And an unhealthy congregation cannot tolerate doubt and unknowing because it's too dangerous. It opens too many difficult doors. We're all haunted houses. We're all full of ghosts. People that we've loved and lost, people who have hurt us and people we've hurt, guilts that we have and sufferings. And none of us want to look at that stuff. I mean, whenever you go into therapy, you want the therapist to fix you. You don't want to do the hard work. You don't want to sit there and look at your past and your childhood and all of that. You just want to work. And so in a similar way, people go to a church because they're broken. And the last thing they want to do, like myself, is look at that darkness. But the temptation then of the minister and of the church is to give in to people's demand, which is, oh, I don't want to go there. I don't want to look at the difficult stuff. Tell me I'm okay. Tell me everything's good and I have the answer. But that's exactly the point where I think the church has to refuse, ethically speaking, the demand of the congregants and has to say, we're not going to help you escape your suffering here. We're actually going to help you look at it. We're going to help you bring it to the surface and tarry with it and wrestle with it. And just as an example, I did an interview last year and on this very subject, and I used an example of a family whose son had died. And it was just a fictional example, but I said, imagine every week they meet for dinner and nobody ever talks about it. But then 1 week after a year, somebody says, I really miss him. And someone tells a funny story and people laugh, and then someone tells a sad story and someone sheds a tear. I said, is the suffering more pronounced now they're talking about it? Or was it more pronounced when nobody spoke of it? Now, what was interesting is the interviewer actually started to cry. And he said, my son died last year. He says, I'm a minister of a church. And he said, I have not been able to speak of that. I've had to hold it down and pretend everything's okay. And he says, all I want to do is be able to speak about that in my community and share that burden. That's what I'm speaking about.